Daniel, chapter 6. Very, very nice chapter. Many of you know the story, but we'll have a deeper look and maybe we'll see something you haven't seen before. Love it. Love it. Absolutely love it. So, Daniel chapter 6, I'm not going to read the chapter as a whole. We'll just go through it verse by verse and we'll just pause and expand on what we just read. Here's the thing. So we already know, I guess even without me saying, but for some of us it may be new, that Daniel was going through the kingdom of Nebuchadnezzar. So he had a pretty prominent position in the kingdom of Babylon under the king Nebuchadnezzar, and he was a great testimony to him, as well as his friends Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And the way actually Daniel got to be known by Nebuchadnezzar, well, first of all, Daniel probably was from a relatively noble family from Israel to start with, and ended up being groomed for some sort of a governmental position somewhere in the kingdom of Babylon, which was pretty smart idea by the king. Okay, when we get all these different nations, we want to kind of assimilate them, integrate them into our society, and so that they can so we can grow the empire and be effective in governance and so on. Kind of like if you have a black community, probably having a black guy to go and be a cop there, right? Or judge. You know, it's better. The black man is there for the black people, and so on. So here we have Nebuchadnezzar got to know Daniel, of course, through that dream that he couldn't even remember, and Daniel was able to not only recall the dream but also interpret it, and that's how he became famous. So Nebuchadnezzar put him in position of authority and prominence, along with his friends. And that was during the time of Nebuchadnezzar. Then Nebuchadnezzar died. And we know that Nebuchadnezzar actually, and I believe primarily by the testimony of Daniel and those three young men, actually got saved, got to be with the Lord. But after him, his son, or maybe grandson, I think it was probably son, Belteshazzar was the next king, and we know that didn't turn out well. That was in chapter 5, and that ended up with that hand writing on the wall without the body, saying "Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin." You know, you have been weighed, and you have been found wanting. And of course, the Bible tells us that that is really the message to every person in this world. Everybody is going to be weighed, and everybody is going to be found wanting, because that's the problem with all of us. Now, that was still Babylon, but that was the end of Babylon, right? So chapter 5 was the end of Babylon. And now the whole empire is taken over by a different country. And so that's the finish of a certain jurisdiction, certain power. And Babylon is merely going to become just a province now. The power shifts farther to the east, to a place called Shushan, and that was the capital of the empire that consisted of two main branches, or two main ethnic groups, Persians and Medians. And Persians basically today is Iran. Persia used to be called Persia not that long ago. After World War II, Iran was not Iran, it was Persia. And if you go to Persia, some people ignorantly call these people, all of them that are in Middle East, Arabs. They don't like it. We are not Arabs, we are Persians, right? And so it's a little bit different ethnic group, a lot of rich history, and I think very nice people. Very modern, I wish they didn't go through what happened there. But I think West is to be blamed for what happened there. So let's see how West screws up Ukraine now, eh? That will be interesting to see. So that's that part, and then Media would be farther to the east. So maybe something like, I don't know, what is there? Pakistan, Afghanistan, something like that. So Pretty large empire, actually very large, basically reached all the way to Egypt on the east side, on the west side, and all the way to what would be maybe India or something like that on the east. So pretty large empire, and that would be the empire of the day. They dominated everything. It was the empire of the world. That was what is America today, and seems to be losing that position. That's what this country was back then. You know, they pretty much called the shots and dominated the world economy and power and everything. Now that is going to come to an end when Alexander the Great is going to come to a power, and he's going to put pretty bravely actually destroy Persian Media. He was a pretty brilliant commander and so on. But it was a short-lived. He died young, without posterity, and so that empire will be dissipated. And out of that came, from the rumbles of that empire, came Roman Empire. So those are the four empires: Babylon, Persia Media second, then Macedonia or Greece. Macedonia is essentially next door to Greece, it's kind of same group. And then Roman Empire. And what we, even though we know that the Roman Empire no longer exists, I would argue that Roman Empire in some ways is still in continuation. This didn't just end and we have an end of history and suddenly something new. There is a great continuation of that all the way till today. So with that in mind, we are in chapter 6, and basically we are now opening or starting with the life of Daniel, and it's just an episode really, in this Persian Median Empire. And so this episode is very telling, very deep, very interesting, and very famous. It's one of those things that's being taught to kids along with David and Goliath, Noah's flood, and maybe Daniel in the lion's den. So it's a very famous story. So let's just go through it and get some wisdom. So number 1, verse number 1, chapter 6, we read, "It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 princes, which should be over the whole kingdom, and over these 3 presidents, of whom Daniel was first, that the princes might give accounts unto them, and the king should have no damage. Then this Daniel was preferred above the presidents and princes, because an excellent spirit was found in him, and the king thought to set him over the whole realm." All right, so that's a bit of an introduction. We are learning about how the kingdom is structured as far as the leadership and management. All right, so that makes a lot of sense. You cannot really handle governing of such a great empire without delegating the power to certain ranks. And so he has these 3 main presidents, so they would be the 3 main leaders, and these 3 leaders would be, I guess, overseeing, maybe these different princes. And so prince would be maybe a geographical a person, maybe over certain area, right? It could be a finances, could be a military, it could be, I don't know, markets, typical stuff that you find in the companies, or you'll find in the government. We have government as well. We have a transportation department and agriculture and healthcare and all that stuff, right? So those are princes, essentially. That's what it means. And but there is like super princes, or Bible calls them these presidents. So they're presiding over these, I guess, 3 main categories. And that way he can manage it. Now he tells us here that of one of the 3 presidents was Daniel. And that's interesting because Daniel, remember Daniel, was very prominent in the Babylonian kingdom. But in the kingdom of his son, he was not prominent at all. He was completely forgotten, actually, right? So it's really interesting that, you know, that this Darius somehow finds out, and not only he brings him in, but actually puts him back in to the complete top of the power. And after maybe it took a while for him to recognize, okay, this is really somebody, and actually puts him in a position of top power. Because the Bible tells us that an excellent spirit was found in Daniel. Now, what does that mean? It just means that the guy was super character, great integrity, great character. It's just probably a lot of knowledge and abilities, all right? Because that comes with fear of God. You know, the Bible tells us that the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. Do you want to become a wise and a person of excellent spirit? Well, you are right now on the right train, right? You're sitting here learning the Bible, and hopefully you do have the ambition to grow even outside of the church. You know, that you read your Bible, that you encourage one another, teach your children. That then you, I promise you, you will continue to grow, and Cameron, and you will have an excellent spirit. Right now, you're just nothing, right? So you have to work on that. You're like a branch. You know, you're like a branch that has a lot of potential, and it can go south or it can go up. So let's pray, and let's, I have a great hope for you. I don't want to say pick up on you, but I just did. That you will continue to grow and become a man of an excellent spirit. All right? And you know what? People of an excellent spirit, I promise you, you're going to probably have some prominence in life, you know. And it can be in all sorts of areas. The Bible speaks about a person that masters his craft is not going to be without recognition, you know, even in halls of kingdom and who knows what. So please take it seriously, take it to your heart, and learn to be a person like Daniel. Now maybe Daniel seems to be like way too high. It's like this Mount Everest. I will never be like Daniel. You know, but Daniel was a kid too, right? That's not something impossible. If you choose to follow the Lord, if you truly fear Him, and if you don't have a non-repentive spirit, this is what destroys a person. Often pride and cockiness and backsliding, laziness, and sinking into sin. If you fear the Lord and won't give up, but in faith follow Him and let Him correct you, then God will give you excellent spirit, and you will become like Daniel. So that is something that's for sure available, accessible to all of us. Now, when we talked about this, I want us to sort of we will follow the story, and let me think. Maybe I'll just come to what I want to say in the end. So let's continue to read now, verse 4. Then the presidents and princes sought to find occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom, but they could find none occasion nor fault. For as much as he was faithful, neither was there any error or fault found in him. All right, so we see that these people are somehow jealous, or I shouldn't say jealous, but envious of his position, of his power, and they want to take him down. We don't know exactly what bothers them, but somehow they don't like him in the position and they want to take him down. And naturally, they are looking for some problems. Now, there's nothing new under the sun. That's exactly what we see even in our culture, don't we? You know, if you see somebody that's somehow inconvenient, maybe they're telling something we don't want to hear, or maybe they're not with us to kind of skim something from the king. They're too honest, you know. Then we'll try to negotiate with them, try to get them on board, you know. But you know what? I'm talking a gossip with this guy, and the guy, it doesn't stick. You know, he's not responding to it. Now it makes me feel embarrassed, and so now he's my enemy. Ladies are famous for that. I think like in a nurse, you sometimes in a nurse community, this kind of stuff is going on. Like, you gotta be part of the team, and if you're not, we'll destroy you, right? In a way that ladies are good at to destroy. Not that men don't do that too. They just are maybe a little bit more straightforward. But that's kind of what is in the Bible. That's one of the things I love in the Bible, about the Bible. Right? It's not a sugar-coated story that just worships a person and doesn't give us the real glimpse into real life. This is real life. This is what we see in this world. So this is what they are trying to do, get rid of him. Then said these men, we shall not find any occasion against this Daniel. And notice how they speak about it. Right? This Daniel, right? We can speak like that today too, and that has a certain connotation, doesn't it? this Daniel. All right, we can find against this Daniel. Maybe there are more Daniels. So, which Daniel are you talking about? I'm talking about this Daniel. I don't think that's what it means. They're really irritated by him, aren't they? Except we find it against him concerning the law of his God. All right, so this is a hint. The law of his God. That tells me that the God that Daniel has is in some ways unique to the other gods. So remember Nebuchadnezzar, that was long before, he had an encounter with God's power, and he sent to all the provinces and told everybody, this is the God that is worthy of all his power and honor and glory, and he is forever and will live forever, and nothing even come close to that. And so the testimony was there, but then of course you have the period of Belteshazzar, and nobody knew about God, nobody knew about Daniel. So, it does happen like that in a culture, that you go through certain ups and downs. There is a time where people are more open to gospel and there is more reverence to God, and then there is a time where it's not. That's not really that unusual. Perhaps we are now on a downswing, right? That Christianity is sort of not really in a favor of some sort of a main public stream. So that tells me that Daniel is a testimony and follows his Lord really as a minority. It's not necessarily mainstream, right? Then these presidents and princes assembled together to the king and said thus unto him, King Darius, live forever. All right. So we need to understand what's going on here. These guys are irritated by Daniel. They don't want him there. They would like to replace him. Maybe he is a roadblock into something they would like to do. Whatever it is, they want to get rid of him. And the way this whole thing starts, as far as their execution of their plan, which we will find out what it is Darius live forever, okay? So just remember, whenever somebody tells you something nice, that may not necessarily be good news, right? Darius live forever. So it's obviously... and I want us to see something here. These guys, there's certain parties here. Let's just say 3 parties, 3 players in this whole scheme, right? There's the King Darius. And the King Darius, we don't really know much about him yet. We'll know a little bit more. But King Darius, we just know that it's the king. He is the one that's on top of everything. And when you are on top of everything, of course, you want to have the very, very best to make sure that you succeed, that you are continuous, that you are powerful, you maintain your power, all right? So that's the first player. Second player is, of course, Daniel. And we know that King Darius actually has wisdom compared to Belshazzar that we read about in previous chapter. Unlike Belteshazzar, unlike Belshazzar, actually Darius is able, even though he may not necessarily be a Christian at this point, but he is able to recognize, and it takes Darius to be the guy in charge, even though he's a Christian and perhaps he's not a Christian, right? The King Darius probably is not a Christian, but he sees Daniel, a man of excellent spirit. He probably knows about his God, but hey, this is a great, reputable God. There's a lot of reputation about, a lot of history. That's the guy I want. In fact, I'm going to make him the first. And that happens like that in history too, right? Sometimes people don't care what's your religion, but if you're really a person of an excellent spirit, they want you to be in charge, and they promote you and so on. It's only in an ideologically infested society where you have to pass certain ideological requirements. And if you're not woke, then you're not welcome. Oh, you're a Christian? Out, right? So that's we've had that. I mean, people would, for example, decline or deny these vaccines, so they were kicked out. To me, that's a disgusting leadership, right? And stupid leadership. That's like Belshazzar. Stupid leadership. You should be looking at quality, right? But nowadays, with all these quota, we need to have this many women, this many men, this many homos, then you're obviously going to end up with poor company and poor leadership, because you really need to look for the best people, And I remember like a Safe on Foods in town, you guys were saying in Spruce Grove that they had a really good staff there. They just tend to be, and almost like, look, they must have somebody smart in HR that just knows how to recognize people. And you go to some other stores, and it's like, oh man, you know, like you really don't want to work here, do you? But so that's something that I see here. But anyway, so they are starting the speech, and they have a proposal, and we know what is their motive. So, so that's okay. I didn't finish this part. So we have King Darius, we have Daniel, and then of course the third party. I will lump them all together. Is all these people that are coming with this proposal. They want to take Daniel down. So that's the presidents and some princes, maybe all of them. So that would be a good group. You know, remember there was 120 of them plus 3 presidents. So it's a big group, and they would somehow conspire against Daniel. So these are the 3 parties. Now, the one that is at the forefront in some ways is the king, because the king is the one that basically have now these 2 options. You know, he's at the center of things, right? He has Daniel, good, excellent spirit, and now we learn that on the other side you have these servants, these princes, these presidents, which are not good. You know, these are going to be harmful. And if these guys are bad against Daniel, who is the top, then guess where they're going to aim next? They're going to aim at king. And we'll see that they really have that kind of mindset. So they're full of themselves, they are puffed up, they're wicked and proud, and have agenda that is not necessarily advantageous to the king. So let's just carry that in our minds, and maybe we will like to put ourselves in the shoes of Daniel, because the story kind of follows him. But try to put yourself in the shoes of the king, all right? Think about yourself. What would you do? Because you are, let's say, like a king in your life, and you have to decide. And sometimes it's really difficult, because you think that, okay, these are noble people, and here we have Daniel, that's a noble person. And you don't realize that there is a little bit of a topography in those people. And some people are good, some people are not. And it's not always clear at the beginning, at the first sight. He certainly doesn't know that. He doesn't know what's going on behind the scenes, but the difference is already there. There is a nobleman, Daniel. We know that. He doesn't know that. And there are wicked people. We know that. He doesn't know that yet, but he will find out. And so in verse 7, we continue and we read these this council. And by the way, council. I was just reading about Soviet. You know what Soviet means? Soviet means, Soviet Union. Soviet is a lot more common word in Russia than necessarily related to communism. So Soviet means council. It's some sort of a council. And basically, the communists, they use this idea of council to replace the normal government of the day in early 1900s. And they started making these councils all over the country. And so it would be Soviet. We are Czechs, so we actually have a somewhat similar language to Russian. And we have a word vieta. Vieta means sentence, right? So vieta, Soviet is with vieta, with sentence, with some sort of a word, all right? So that means what is a Soviet? So essentially this is a Soviet. This is a council. These people get together and they are going to implement some agenda that's not necessarily under their authority. They're supposed to listen to the king, understand what the business, understand what the objectives are, what is the purpose, and make sure that the business and that the objective of the king is fulfilled. But now they have some other agenda, right? It's completely unrelated to the king. They just decided we're gonna do something, and so essentially these are, they have a little bit of a Soviet here, a little bit of a council. So the presidents of the kingdom, the governors and the princes, the counselors and the captains, all the important people, right, have consulted together to establish a royal statute and to make a firm decree that whosoever shall ask a petition of any god or man for 30 days, save of thee, O king, he shall be cast into the den of lions. All right? Now, the Bible tells us that, well, they continue, they say, "Now, O king, establish the decree and sign the writing, that it be not changed according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which altereth not. Wherefore King Darius signed the writing and the decree." So again, put yourself in the shoes of Darius. You're the king, and you are now approached by all these nobles, and they got together, they thought about it, they talked about it, and they came to an agreement. All right? And we talked about it on Sunday, right? Do you think that they all agreed with it? First of all, the top dog. Remember, there were princes and governors and 3 presidents. They say we all agreed with it. Well, if you all agreed with it, then where is Daniel? Right? So that's how far these unions, these fascists always like to go, right? We all agree, but no, we all don't agree. You know, just like when I hear Trudeau, everybody got a vaccine, everybody this and that. And now it's with the Ukraine. Everybody is against Russia, right? So you cannot really have, if you have a little bit different opinion, if you don't completely condemn, like this is what I just heard, that there is Russian hockey players in NHL, so they're pressurized. You need to denounce Putin, or he will kick you out of an NHL. You know, did you hear that? Ovechkin, yeah.
They booed him because he wouldn't do it. He said he's my...
Yeah, to be honest with you, I respect him for that. You know, it's a little bit more complicated than what I like to portray, right? Because, by the way, let me just get off track here. This is definitely not a conflict between Russia and Ukraine. That's not really what's happening. This is a much bigger game, all right? That's all I'm going to say. So, you know, and I can hear your disagreement here. Yeah? All right. I like sarcasm. So here we have, you know, we are in agreement. Yeah, except you're not, you know. And who knows, maybe even among the 120 people, maybe they were not all aboard with that. We don't know. But they certainly didn't speak up. So these guys, they come to the king and they say, this is what you should do. Now there's a lot here. Number one, I want us to realize, okay, clearly they have actually something that is against the king, because the king just found somebody that is really an excellent spirit, and he appointed him. And the reason he appointed him is because he doesn't want to have a damage, right? Because it's very easy to suffer damage when you run something big, because you can't really cover it by yourself. So you really need to have a good people in a position of authority to really represent you and represent you well. It's a disaster when you end up with ambassador, you know, like the British ambassador during Trump. You know, he goes and he opens his mouth and badmouth the president. And of course, that was the end of any kind of communication between British and Americans because of this stupid ambassador. So this is not very wise. You want to have a good people in position of power so that they can represent you. So that's bad. It's not really good. These people don't have a good thing in mind. Second, they come to him, and they come to him with a proposition which the king signs. And he agrees with that. And I think it's very craftily, it's very well crafted, because obviously their objective is to create a condition which will make Daniel to trespass, expecting that he is probably not going to cave in and give up on his God, because he is actually a person of character. So they know that. So they say, can we use that to our advantage? But the number two, what is the way they crafted it is, of course, to put their king into it somehow, right? So they will come to him and say, hey, this is good for you, right? So this is very important that at surface, at first when he saw it, he didn't see it. He thought it's good. So let me tell you, you know, put yourself in a position of king. It is our responsibility, and it's important that we are wise and that we discern. Not everything that's sold to us as something good for you, the people actually mean good for you, right? And I know this is probably for you know, all of us that are a little bit older and a little bit experienced. That's not a surprise, but sometimes it is a surprise, even for us. You know, like I've been deceived even later, right? Not only as a teenager. And so that's something that we as a man or women of decision, like they came with these vaccines, for example, right? So this is good for you, right? It's going to boost you up and you're going to survive. Well, that's not true. And why do they push it so much? Because they cared. Probably they have another agenda and they cloak it under, okay, we want to help you to survive. So these guys as well, they are bringing a proposal to the king and they're trying to really hide an ulterior purpose there, which is to destroy Daniel. And destruction of Daniel actually is going to be damage to the king. So this is nasty. This is a poison. This is really bad. And the king jumps on it. He does not see through it. He gets caught in it. And to me, we can just move on from here and see the rest of the story, which we will. But I think it's important to realize that he made a mistake. What do you think is the mistake of the king? Obviously, he decided, but okay, so he didn't see it, but what could he have done to prevent it? Any thoughts?
Could have asked Daniel.
Yeah. You yourself, you put Daniel over everything. So how come you're not talking to him? To me, that's really almost surprising, and I'm not really sure what to think of it. But that is the reality. He put somebody in authority, and yet he allowed other people to basically bypass the authority, come straight to him. I know that God doesn't allow it. Nobody can go straight to God. You have to go through the priest. Now, we don't have priests nowadays because we have one priest, and that's the Lord Jesus Christ. But no man come to the Father but by me, says the Lord. So the Lord is not going to receive anybody. If somebody tries to come to Lord, you say, Lord, Lord, didn't we in your name, this and that? And say, I never knew you. Right? You reject Jesus, you reject me. And that should be really the statement. You reject Daniel, then I don't want to talk to you. Talk to Daniel, and then he's going to tell me things. So this is, I think, a flaw in the management, and I don't know why is he doing it, but bottom line is, it is a mistake. And so I will just spill what I see behind this. So already I said, try to see yourself in the position, in the shoes of this king, Darius. And let me now put perspective on, let's say, how these two other parties are. Daniel, I see in Daniel Jesus, okay? Daniel is like Jesus. And you will see that there is a lot of things that actually color that picture of Christ in here. We know that Daniel is not Jesus, but he's a picture of Christ, okay? And you're the king, and here is the Christ, and he's an excellent spirit, and he is the top, all right, among the 120, And then you have, on the other hand, you have these counselors, which is many. This is one, and here is many. And they're all nobles, and they hate Daniel, right? And so now you're deciding. And that's kind of where we are in our life. You're going to listen to Jesus, or you're going to listen to somebody that has a poison in their heart, that hate Jesus, or they hate something, right? So who do we, when you're challenged with a decision, where do you go? Do you all figure it out by yourself, like Darius tried to? Well, no, you need to go to the Lord, especially when it gets really challenging and complicated and so on, and ask Him and seek His advice, seek His will. Of course, Darius failed to do that. So then he signs it, and they are really pressuring him. They say, we need to stamp it, and we need to sign it, and so they're really trying to make it kind of a bulletproof, so that there is no way of backing off out of it. All right, and that's kind of the purpose. Verse 10 now. Now when Daniel knew that this writing was signed, he went into his house, and his windows being open in his chamber toward Jerusalem, he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as he did aforetime. All right, that's interesting. The moment he found out, okay, there's not a lot of second thinking here. He just goes to the house and he continues to what he has done. And of course, that's not allowed now. And by the way, another thing I would like to mention, that's also something that we can observe. Isn't that something that these people try to do, establish some sort of a rule, some sort of a policy that you must not pray to God, but to a king. So essentially that's a shifting your ultimate reverence and ultimate honor and glory from God to a government. That happens a lot, right? This is why a dictator, a tyrant, really doesn't like God, because God is a competition. And he cannot really get certain things done because you're going to check everything, right? It's like this policeman, he told me that, I don't know, this cover on the license plate is somehow illegal. So maybe it is. And I told him, okay, I'd like to double check and so on. But the big people don't like that. Well, if you want to double check, then I'll give you a ticket and you can argue it at the court. So, okay. So I guess I'm going to have to, But that's kind of the mentality that, how dare you challenge the authority? How dare you challenge me? Well, I do because you're not the top authority, right? They like to have control over the children, for example, at school. You need to obey us. And proper children say no. And you've seen these tons of different videos how a kid will, let's say, argue that that's not really the case. Let's say there is a difference between men and women. And now that person is young and there is this authority and power and size of the teacher. And he ridicules them, maybe even sends them home and all that stuff. This is a typical for people that completely reject God. Then there is no check valve. There's no sort of a protection. Basically, who rules is going to be the guy with the most power, and that's going to end up to be a government somehow, right? Which is why it is important that we be like Daniel. And we'll be one of those people that are not easily swayed one way or another by the pressure or rules of the government. And this is something that a lot of people don't understand. You have even Christians, they say, you have to obey the authority. Yeah, that's the point. You have to obey the authority. And you have to understand who the authority is. And it's not always the king. So it's just then on the side. But here we see, of course, Daniel, and that's something that's admirable. Once again, that no matter what they say, we're just going to do it. No matter what they say, we're going to meet as a church, right? That's what they did. We appreciate it. That's why I liked it. No matter what, we're going to stick to certain principle. We're going to teach our children the proper way and not expose them to this junk of woke movement and all that stuff. Whatever it is. There's going to be also new things coming down the line. But it is important that we know who is our God and reverence Him. It's so similar to Mordecai, right? Bow down before the government. No, bow down before the Lord. Same thing with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Bow down before the idol. No, we're going to bow down before God. We're not going to bow down before idol. God said. Exodus chapter 20. 10 Commandments. So Daniel does not regard it. He doesn't argue with that. He is actually the guy in charge. He doesn't argue about it. He just says, I'm just going to continue to do it. And I like it. In fact, I like to take a position like that. I don't necessarily have the desire to always go and fly a flag somewhere in front of a government. I'm not going to obey you. I don't necessarily think it's necessary. Just do what you believe is right. Just do it. You don't have to. And by the way, it was not only Pastor Coates and Pastor Stevens that kept going doing churches. There was a lot of churches that just kept going, no matter what. They were just a little bit more quiet, and I think that's fine. Some people say, well, you just do it in quiet. So what? We're supposed to go to the streets and call the government names? You're just asking for trouble. I don't understand why. Right? But anyway, Daniel didn't make a big fuss about it. But he didn't hide about it either, right? It's not like hiding behind the door. Like Fred was saying the other day, like they kind of close everything. And I understand. I understand. But it's very noble to see Daniel here that he's not making a big fuss about it, but at the same time he's not hiding. And actually, there's a point there that I am open about it. I'm not hiding about it now. And I think that's need to be noticed. So he continued to pray to God. And by the way, learn from man with an excellent spirit. Right? He goes and prays, and he even kneels before God. It's good to do that. Not necessarily that somehow God will answer your prayer better if you are in a certain position of the body, but it just teaches you to be humble before the Lord. And it's really difficult to be proud and be on your knees. But even that's possible. But he continued to pray. So then these men assembled and found Daniel praying and making supplication before his God. Well, that's another thing about government, right? So government is what? Peeking through the window, right? You know, peeking through the window or peeking through your cell phone and trying to find out who you are and what do you do, who you're listening to. Isn't that everything always the same? Isn't that amazing that the Bible clearly picks certain points just so that we learn from this? Yeah, they lived. You think we have it hard? They had it hard. Well, I tend to think that they had it worse. But maybe we have it actually as bad as they did. Just a little bit different way. You know, the government spies on us. They try to find out if we are completely compliant and complacent. And if we are not, then, you know, maybe they will figure out how they can, do something with us. And sometimes it's easy to do something. You know, in Daniel's case, it was hard because the guy was such a great guy. But if they can, this is what they do, right? They always pick up something from your past. You know, find somebody that was against the government, and before you know it, they found his computer with some pornography on his computer or something like that. Right? It's always something. Probably most of those people that caught him with the pornography on a computer, they probably watched the pornography too, right? But that's just how it works. Or you know, maybe he was caught on drugs or something like that. Yeah. So that's so typical. And if they can find it, will establish something, make up something. And in that sense, Daniel is again different. It's similar to Jesus. They try to pick something on Jesus, right? And they couldn't find nothing. So eventually they came out with these false witnesses against Jesus. Same thing with Daniel. So anyway, sure enough, they watch. Hey guys, you know, take a picture, put it on camera. No, they didn't have a camera back then. But you have witnesses and so on. Then these men assembled and found Daniel praying and making supplication before his God. Then they came near and spake before the king concerning the king's decree. And they say this, hast thou not signed a decree that every man that ask a petition of any god or man within 30 days, save of thee, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions? The king answered and said, the thing is true, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which altereth not. Sure enough. So he still doesn't know what's going on. But they kind of prepare him, right? Hey, you said it, right? I mean, are we okay here? And they say, yeah, I said that. Okay. And so now they think they got him. Okay? Now they got him. The trap worked. Then they answered and said before the king that Daniel, which is of the children of the captivity of Judah, wink, wink, that's important. You know, it's the Christian people. That's what it's behind this. You know, why do they bring up the fact that he's from the captivity of Judah? Why not just say this Daniel? Everybody, he knows Daniel. He knows very well who Daniel is. Why don't you say this Daniel? Now they say this Daniel of the captivity of of these immigrants, essentially. It's one of those people, that came from Israel. So you can see that it will start with Daniel, and probably next thing is going to be the people of Israel, right? Just like, let's say, in case of Haman. Haman also, right? It was Mordecai. Then he found out Mordecai is from the captivity of the people from Judah. Then let's just get rid of all of them. That's how it happens. Typical. So they answered and they said, the Daniel, which is of the children of the captivity of Judah, regarded not thee. They are so concerned, right? They're concerned that he's not properly respecting the God, the king. He's not properly respecting the law. He is basically illegal. I mean, what are we going to do with people like this disrespecting the law? We're going to have a complete chaos in our country. We can't have that. That's their line. It's a lie. Because they're not, of course, concerned about the law. Just like when I listen to some of these people talking about the law, they don't care about the law or about the health care. You don't care about the health. There's something else behind it. So what do they care about? They want to take Daniel down. And the king at that point realizes, shoot, I have been trapped. I have been put into bad position. Then the king, when he heard these words, was sore displeased with himself. That's a little bit different reaction compared to, let's say, Nebuchadnezzar. When it came to Nebuchadnezzar, hey, there's some people, they're not bowing down. He was mad. And he's like, how dare they? I almost find some kind of nobility behind Darius. This guy is something else. It's pretty good from Darius. So he was sore displeased with himself, and he set his heart on Daniel to deliver him. So he has no problem that he calls on God. He doesn't believe in this God, but hey, whatever, eh? He's a good guy. He's noble. He's of excellent spirit. He can have his God. He grants him liberty. So he's thinking, how can I, man, how? But they were lawyers. They really thought about it really good. There was no way to alter it. And he labored till the going down of the sun to deliver him. So that was the ruin of the day. He's trying to figure out, shoot, how can I overcome what I just have done? Which is, I signed a petition, and what a stupid thing to do, and I didn't realize what they were really after. I thought they just liked me. I thought that they want that people properly reverence the king. It was not that. They were trying to destroy Daniel, and I really don't want to lose Daniel. Then the king commanded, verse 15, then these men assembled unto the king. So these guys can see that they're not kind of getting their way as smoothly as they thought. Then these men assembled unto the king and said unto the king, and this is pretty nasty, know, O king, that the law of the Medes and Persian is that no decree nor statute which the king establisheth may be changed. You know, so they're reminding you have to do this because you said it. And of course, do you like cutting corners? I personally like cutting corners. My wife's smiling because she knows. I just hate sometimes what happens when you have policy. Some people are really stuck on policy, right? This is how we do it, you know. They're trained into policy, they memorize it, they're really good at it. And then sometimes it just becomes ridiculous. It's the policy that prevents you to do something normal and usual. And so I really appreciate when you encounter somebody that says, well, it is a policy, let me see how I can kind of cut a corner. You know, and that's really what you want. You don't want necessarily somebody that's just completely compliant. You want somebody that has wisdom. Unfortunately, sometimes people prefer people in position of power and places like that that are just complete compliant. I remember I was once interviewing, because I was young, for a position with the company. And I remember one of the things in a questionnaire, so what would you do? Here is the policy. And but, it would be actually easier and better to maybe do it this way. So what would you do? And I lost my opportunity there because I said, well, maybe there is a time to a little bit discern and maybe even overcome the policy. That's not what companies like, right? You just obey, trust and obey, for there's no other way. Yeah? So I really appreciate it. Don't you come, how you come to the store, for example, right? And they say, okay, so, you want to buy a camera or something like that. And so they say, okay, good. So now we have everything down. So what's your name? What do you need my name for? Well, that's just our policy. There we go again. There we go again. No, I don't need to give you my name. So I remember once, I think I was in Staples or London Drugs, something like that. So the guy just insisted, I'm sorry, but I can't really do something, So I started reading his name from an tag, So I was it Earl. So Earl, and he starts writing. He says his second name. He continues to write. And I say, whoa, wait a minute, you can't do that. I say, that's exactly my point. Yes, I can do that. I will give you money, you give him the goods, and we'll be friends. And that's it. Well, but this is a company's policy. It's not a company's. Well, then it's a wrong policy. And by the way, in Canada, that's illegal, just so you know, right? That's illegal to condition sale by providing private information, including address or telephone number or email. That's actually illegal too. It's okay to ask for it, but it's illegal to require. My point is, I appreciate that this salesman will somehow kind of, realize, okay, we need to do something else. And we need to a little bit cross the line. And of course, these guys, they were policy, right? It's got to be done exactly according to the law. And it also reminds me a little bit what they did to Jesus. When Jesus was, for example, with his disciples picking up some food on a Sabbath day because they were hungry. But sure enough, his Pharisees, hey, mister, there's a policy. How come you're eating on Saturday? And Jesus had to correct them. He said, Sabbath is for you. You're not for Sabbath. Sabbath is for you. God gave Sabbath for the man, not man for the Sabbath. Laws are for the evildoers. Laws are for us, not we for the laws. But they exactly did that, right? They created law, they created policy, so they can destroy man. That's what a lot of policies we have today, too, right? It's just to trap people, just to make you look bad, just to catch you. It's just evil, completely, utterly evil. So, but anyway, there was no way to back out. You can see that this king doesn't have that kind of power that you saw with Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar would basically just kill them. And they wouldn't dare to do something like that. But with Darius, it's a little bit different. You can see that there is a little bit more distribution of power. Less on the king and more on these governors and counselors. So he is a little bit stuck in a hard place. So we read then verse 16, then the king commanded, and they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. Now the king spake and said unto Daniel, thy God, whom thou servest continually, he will deliver thee. Now I want you to see the way he speaks about God. First of all, he does go ahead with this, but it's nice to see this trust and this wish, I guess, more than trust maybe, your God is going to get you out of this trouble. So he knows something about Daniel, probably some stories about Daniel and maybe his friends, were remembered. And so that's what he says. But I want you to see what he says about this God. He speaks about your God, right? Thy God. So it's not his God, it's your God, And then a stone was brought and laying upon the mouth of the den. Here is something interesting. So where is Daniel heading to? Right? So Daniel is the good man. Excellent spirit, in some ways a picture of Christ. He's a good counselor. There is nobody better. But the king decided to go with the bad counselors, with the majority. Now what happens here, Daniel is condemned based on a false accusation, faked one. And think about it, he is brought down to this place. The Bible tells us that he was laid upon the mouth of the den. So den would be some sort of a pit. I would imagine probably down, right? It's easy to control lions. You put everything down, I think. So it was probably a pit. And the king sealed it with his own signet and with the signet of his lords, that the purpose might not be changed concerning Daniel. And then the king went to his palace and passed the night fasting. Neither were instruments of music brought before him, and his sleep went from him, so he couldn't sleep. And And I want you to see in verse 70 it also says that a stone was brought and laid upon the mouth of the den. So mouth would be opening. So where is Daniel? He's in a pit with a stone covering. And by the way, in the pit, he's there with the beasts. Right? Now what does that remind you of? To me, that's like a picture of hell. All right? Because hell is down. Jesus, when he was buried, he was covered with a stone. That's kind of similar. And what about these lions? Well, one thing you know about lions, we know that the devil is compared to a lion, right? Our adversary as lion, circles around us, seeking who he may devour. So the lion in the Bible, I know there is also like Jesus, or the Lamb of God is like a Lion of Judah. But there is also lion is compared to a devil. And so here, essentially, when you see a picture of this, obviously it's a physical danger. He's there with the beasts, and potentially, in fact, it's just about guaranteed he's not going to survive. But on a spiritual level, I think he's there in hell. And of course, this is a guaranteed death. He's in a pit of hell. He's going to be destroyed. And these guys that had their idea to take over, I guess, the kingdom eventually, they got their way, didn't they? And so it looks like a closed deal. They're probably celebrating tonight while the king is distressed. And that's a little bit helping with when they crucified Jesus, right? I bet you some people were happy. Finally, we got rid of him. You had a lot of people that were completely distressed. You see those two people coming from Emmaus, and they are not ready to talk much, and they're sad, and they're depressed. Jesus joins them and is like, what are you depressed about? What's going on? So people were very sad and disappeared and hid in places. We see that same thing with Daniel. We don't really see that these guys celebrated. I promise you they were celebrating. They got their way. And on the other hand, the king is distressed. But the morning comes. Then the king arose very early in the morning, verse 19, and went in haste into the den of lions. That's also what happened with Jesus. That happened early in the morning. And when he came to the den, he cried with a lamentable voice into Daniel. And the king spake and said to Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, is thy God, still call him thy God, whom thou servest, continue, able to deliver thee from the lions? Now that's a good question, right? Is your God able to deliver thee? Remember, that was the question or statement from Nebuchadnezzar. He also said once, And who is that God? Of course, he said it in a Nebuchadnezzar way. But he basically said, who is that God that's going to be able to deliver it from my hand, or from this and from that? And so here, that's a big question, right? It's a big question. Probably King Darius has some testimony about Daniel's faith and maybe some past stories. But it's just not the same until you see it, until you experience it. And so now he is obviously about to discover that God indeed is able to deliver somebody from anything. He did it with those 3 young men. He did it with, at other times and so on. Then said Daniel unto the king, O king, live forever. Isn't that interesting, eh? So, now when he says it just sounds so much better, doesn't it? Because we know think about it. And another thing I want us to notice, in the end, it was the king that had to put him there. It's terrible, right? Think about the situation. And sometimes it can happen to us that we may end up being mistreated by somebody and they cannot do otherwise. So it's like when it comes to, let's say, these vaccines which we just went through, I don't think everybody went on it. Sometimes we maybe were pretty nasty and upset about people that kind of went along with it. But I wonder sometimes, they don't want to do it, but they have to do it. So, what else you want to do? He has to obey the law. So it's a really pickle. really a precarious situation. And I can see that actually Daniel does not hold any grudge against the king. You know, the first thing that comes out of mind, you know, is not, "Hey, I'm still here." You know, do you believe me now? Whatever. You know, he is humble and he actually blesses the king, and he says, "O king, live forever." All right. Verse 22: "My God has sent His angel and has shut the lions' mouths, that they have not hurt me. For as much as before Him innocency was found in me, and also before thee, O king, have I done no hurt." So we see here once again an angel. Who do you think the angel is? Maybe it's the same kind of angel that was there in the fiery furnace with those three Jewish boys. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Perhaps Christ, all right? It's possible. I know it may be confusing why the Bible calls him angel. The Bible calls Jesus sometimes an angel as well. And that's because Jesus is an angel. Angel is not necessarily always created being to do God's bidding, spiritual beings. Angel is, in a little bit broader sense, a messenger. And certainly Christ is a messenger as well. So, and by the way, when you think about Jesus, Jesus really is everything, okay? Jesus is a pastor. He is the preacher. He is the lamb. He is the priest. He is the angel, all right? Jesus is fulfilling of everything that's good. And then, of course, the devil is fulfillment of everything that's evil. Good there? So my God has sent His angel and He saved me. All right. Verse 23, "Then was the king exceeding glad for him." Right? That would be a happy thing. That would be like to find out that Jesus actually lives. Right? On the third day. So that's another parallel that I think I see here. That Daniel was saved. And Daniel does live. Daniel was dead, yet he liveth. Right? Daniel was buried. It was a clearly end of him, and yet it wasn't, you know. So then was the king exceeding glad for him, and commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no manner of hurt was found upon him, because he believed in his God. If you want to underline anything, if you do that in the Bible, then I would underline this part. Why was he saved? Why didn't he die? You know, he said, because I was innocent, I didn't do any hurt, I didn't do any of this. But the Bible tells us that's not why he was saved. He was saved, he was not killed, because he believed in his God. And it's an everlasting lesson, right? It just keeps repeating this very important thing, that God saves those that believe in Him. You have to trust the Lord. It's not about how smart we are. It's not about how prepared we are. It's not about, I don't know. It's about whether we trust the Lord or not. So we're coming to an end. And the king commandment, verse 24, "And they brought those men which had accused Daniel, and they cast them into the den of lions, them, their children, and their wives. And the lions had the mastery of them, and brake all their bones in pieces, or ever they came at the bottom of the den." So it's interesting. This is a clear miracle. You know, there's always, I bet you there's a bunch of idiots, they're going to say, well, they were probably hungry. Maybe the king kind of fed them some food. That would be one way to kind of help him. Give them a lot of fresh bones so they don't care about Daniel. Maybe that would be the way to go. So how do you explain that the moment all these people fell down, they were after them and they all killed them? You know. So clearly this was a miracle, and God made a point here. So first, it looked like Daniel is going down, and these guys got their way. Last, first. Became first. First became last. And that's how it's going to be with this world. I mean, this world, what we are seeing is we see a lot of boasting. And we see conspiracy against God going on. We see conspiracy by Jesus against the church, against the Bible. There's definitely that going and very successful and progressing. We see that. So we are right now before going down to the lion's den. Maybe some are in the lion's den, and these people are getting there when they're rising up. That's how it's going to go. Hence, again, I so strong about this point that you may be thrown into the lion's den. You will suffer persecution, but you have to believe. That's what will get you through. And that doesn't necessarily always mean that you will not be killed. In his case, that's how it ended up. What really matters is, in the bigger scheme of things, that you will not see the final death. And the final death is actually a pit of hell with the devils. All right? That's what you will not see. There has been many people that suffer persecution to the point of being killed. Either at a stake, people were sawn asunder, people were thrown to the lions. I mean, didn't they do that in the Roman Empire? Throw people, Christians among the lions? Try to preach to them. Pre-tribulation rapture. Okay, I could have it now. Somehow they didn't have it. It's a stupid theology. It's not true. It's a lie. We will suffer, and we will be tested. Whether we really trust the Lord or not. And Daniel trusted. And Daniel was saved. Verse 25. And this is where I see a great change compared to what we saw before. Before, Darius is looking at Daniel and speaking about thy God. Is he going to do it? I heard good things about him. I heard good things about you. But let's see how that works. But now he takes it a little bit farther. And we saw a little bit similar thing with the King Nebuchadnezzar. And the king Darius wrote unto all people, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied unto you. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom men tremble and fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God and steadfast forever, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall be even unto the end. Remember I asked you maybe a couple of weeks ago, what is the central theme of the book of Daniel? And it feels like on almost every chapter, on every page, we find some sort of a conclusion that God reigns. As it's here again. And the first time it came from Nebuchadnezzar, and several times, now it comes from Darius. And we don't really talk much about Cyrus. We know about Cyrus from other scriptures. I believe Cyrus was a Christian. It's an amazing thing. Let me just a little bit connect what we talk about on Sunday. Remember, Jeremiah was preaching to his people, and he says, submit to the king Nebuchadnezzar. It's over here. You're going to have to go. And they could not see behind certain line. They thought this is a disaster. We need to fight and preserve our nation. Actually, God has something good for you. This Nebuchadnezzar that you don't like so much, he is actually going to become a Christian. He is actually going to promote your God all over the empire. Where you fail, he will actually do it. Reminds me of Saul. God took the greatest enemy of Christianity and turned him into the greatest enemy of the devil. And now he is doing it through Darius. And he's going to do it through Cyrus. It's amazing what God does. And so, let me just, as a side note then, connect it a little bit and say this. If we see unpleasant things happening in our country down the road, if let's say Canada falls apart, or I don't know what may happen, we shouldn't fret. God is going to do something good. I remember we were once talking to this lady. She was from Armenia or somewhere, and she I forget, but Moldova, and Moldova used to have their own language, but basically Russian took over the country. It was basically Romania. Romanians and Moldavians are really the same ethnic group. But Russians basically took over part of that country and turned it into Moldova, or Moldovia, and forced everybody to speak Russian. So it's obviously very harsh and very unpleasant time, isn't it? Would you like that? So somebody, let's say I don't know, imagine that, I don't know, Mexicans or Chinese would come over and make you speak Chinese now. We have all of the, wouldn't you hate it from your guts? But what happened actually in that case there, in Moldova, because of everybody Russian, that actually helped to spread the gospel more. Because the gospel was traveling in Russia a lot better under the regime than, let's say, through Romania. So that's interesting. He said, actually, for the heavenly kingdom, for the kingdom of God, that turned out to be actually a good thing. You know, it was a tough time, but God used it for His purpose. So I just find it excellent here, and I would argue that maybe this is a sign that Darius was found by God as well. Got himself safe, perhaps. Obviously, that's a speculation, but I think it's a good one, isn't it? I think it's possible. He delivered and rescued. Look how he speaks about him. He delivered and rescued. This is Darius speaking about God. He delivers and he rescueth, and he worketh signs and wonders in heaven and in earth. Who has delivered Daniel from the power of the lions? Right? So he testifies, and not only that, he is giving this testimony to all of his empire. So gospel, the message of God is brilliant. God is brilliant. He basically, through these oppressors, actually spread the gospel outside of Israel. Until then, it was everything Judah. Now they went to the empire, and through Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and maybe other people like that, actually the whole empire was infested by Christianity. I find it pretty brilliant about God, who He is, how He works. And so let's not be too concerned about little things. Maybe we don't see them little things, but they are little things from the bigger picture. We see them as big things. But from the bigger picture, they are really not as significant. What really matters is that God rules and is in charge. So this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus and the Persian. So the Bible tells us that these wicked councils and presidents all died, clearly. So that was the end of conspiracy, pretty good. And I would imagine that maybe because of this event, that probably Daniel would be involved in basically forming a new government. And this new government would have been a lot better than what King Darius did in the first place. So notice how it ended up. If you are King Darius in your life, choose Daniel. Choose Christ. Not just for salvation, in your daily life. Choose Him. And be careful about when somebody comes and tells you, "Oh, King, live forever. You're so amazing, and we have something great for you." Ask Jesus if that's the way to go. Amen? Isn't that a cool chapter? It's probably second my favorite. Maybe the favorite. It's a competition. But I love this underlying message very much. And so let's just pray. Lord, we thank You for you are the master of everything. You rule everything, and You are able indeed to deliver anybody from the hands of the wicked. So long we believe in You. And so help us to grow in faith. Help us to become people like Daniel, people of excellent spirit, that do not trust in this world. We don't put too much stake in this world, but we seek that kingdom that's to come. And Lord, help us to grow and become a people that are willing to even suffer to a point of losing our life, because we trust in You and because we care more about the kingdom and everything that comes from You than anything else in the world. You did say that we should seek first the kingdom of God and Your righteousness, and all these things, all the cares that we worry about sometimes too much, will be added to us. And so help us to have our priorities right. Help us to make the right decisions and put our trust in You and put no trust in man. In Jesus' name, amen.